Hey Reddit. I'm here because I feel like my world is crumbling, and I don't know where else to turn. I've been with my wife, Emily, for 8 years, married for 5. We've always been the power couple among our friends, at least, that's what I thought. We bought a house together, have 2 dogs, and up until recently, I thought we were happy. Sure, we had our ups and downs like every couple, but I never imagined I'd be here, writing this post. Things started feeling off about 6 months ago. Emily was always on her phone, more than usual. She'd laugh at her screen, but when I asked what was funny, she'd just say, "Oh, nothing important," and put her phone down. At first, I brushed it off. I mean, we've been together for so long. I trusted her completely. But then, she started going out a lot more, claiming it was girls' night, or she had to stay late at work. Again, I didn't think much of it. Emily's job can be demanding, and I wanted to be supportive. But things kept piling up. Her being distant, her avoiding sex, her acting like I was some inconvenience in her life. I chalked it up to stress. I even started wondering if maybe I was the problem. Was I not doing enough? Was I not making her feel wanted? Last weekend, everything hit the fan. I had decided to surprise Emily by cleaning the house and cooking her favorite dinner. I was feeling pretty proud of myself, like a romantic husband straight out of a cheesy rom-com. I had set the mood with some candles and music, and I couldn't wait for her to come home. But when I picked up her phone to take a cute picture of the dinner setup, I noticed she had left it unlocked on the counter. I know, I shouldn't have snooped, but I was feeling a weird mix of curiosity and suspicion. So, against my better judgment, I glanced at her texts. That's when I found it. A message from a guy named Mark, who I had never heard of. At first, it seemed innocent enough, just casual banter about some great time they had. But then I saw the messages where she referred to him as babe and talked about how much fun they had during their weekend getaway. My heart sank. My gut twisted into knots. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I felt this rush of anger and disbelief, like I was on a roller coaster and just hit the first drop. I flipped through more messages, my hands shaking, and it all clicked into place. The late nights, the evasiveness. She wasn't just hanging out with her friends. She was cheating on me. I didn't know how to react. I was furious, hurt, and completely blindsided. Instead of confronting her right then and there, I decided to play it cool and wait for her to come home. But my mind was racing, and all I could think about was how I had trusted her completely. When Emily finally walked through the door, I could see she was in a good mood, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. She was talking about her day, how her colleagues were planning a fun trip, and my heart was pounding in my chest, preparing for the explosion. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "Hey, I made your favorite dinner," I said, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. As she walked into the dining room, I couldn't help but notice the way she lit up at the sight of the candlelit table. But I couldn't let that distract me. "Emily, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but heavy. Her smile faded a bit, but she shrugged it off, sitting down at the table. "Is it about dinner? Because it looks amazing." I felt a surge of anger at her casualness, but I pushed it down. "No, it's about you and Mark." Her face went pale, and for a second, I thought I might actually see her mask of confidence slip. "Mark? Who's Mark?" she replied, feigning ignorance. The way she said it, like it was the most absurd thing she'd ever heard, made me want to scream. "Don't play dumb, Emily. I saw the messages." I pulled out my phone and showed her the texts, my hands shaking. I watched her face as she read, and her expression shifted from surprise to anger. "Those are just friends being playful. You're overreacting," she shot back, her voice rising defensively. "It's not what you think." "Not what I think," I shot back. "You're calling him babe and talking about weekends together. What am I supposed to think?" She rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. "You don't understand. It's just harmless flirting. You're being so dramatic. You're always so serious and boring." My chest tightened as I processed her words. She was actually trying to turn this around on me, making it seem like I was the villain in this scenario. I felt my heart breaking, the betrayal hitting me like a freight train. "So this is how you handle things? By lying and sneaking around behind my back?" Emily let out a frustrated sigh, like I was the one making things difficult. I just needed a little excitement, okay? You've been so focused on work, and I felt neglected. So, it was my fault now? The anger boiling inside me clashed with the sadness of her excuses. I thought we had built something real together, but now it felt like a house of cards ready to collapse. I could feel the weight of disbelief pressing down on me, the betrayal spreading through my veins like poison. I stood there, staring at the woman I once loved more than anything, feeling like a fool for not seeing the signs sooner. My anger was raw, but beneath that was an unbearable sadness that wrapped around my heart like a vice. Emily's excuses kept coming, each one a twisted knot in my stomach. "You never listened to me," she said, her voice laced with frustration. "You're always working late, and I felt so alone." But that only added to my pain. I had always thought we were a team. Didn't I deserve a conversation about how you were feeling? Not this. I gestured to the messages on my phone, still in my hand like some grotesque trophy of her betrayal. "You just jumped into someone else's bed instead of talking to me?" The air between us felt charged, filled with unspoken words and shattered dreams. The woman who used to cuddle up next to me and talk about our future now felt like a stranger, someone who had turned my love into a weapon against me. I was drowning in confusion. I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes, and I struggled to hold them back. It was a strange cocktail of emotions: anger, sorrow, disbelief. I didn't want to cry in front of her, didn't want to show her how deeply she had cut me. But the facade of strength was cracking, and I could feel myself breaking apart. "Why, Emily? Why him?" My voice trembled, almost a whisper now, as I tried to grasp the reality of what was happening. She just shrugged, her expression shifting from anger to a flippant nonchalance that made my blood boil. "You're overreacting. It was just a fling, nothing serious," she replied dismissively. "Just a fling." Those words hung in the air, echoing in my mind. I felt a surge of fury, but deep down, the sorrow lingered, a heavy blanket of grief smothering the anger. I wanted to believe I could just walk away from this, but part of me clung desperately to the hope that we could fix things. How had it come to this? Every laugh we'd shared, every dream we'd built together now felt like ashes in my mouth. As the confrontation dragged on, I could feel the tension suffocating us, wrapping around my throat like a noose. Every time I tried to express my pain, she brushed it aside, her tone dripping with annoyance. "You're being so dramatic. I thought you'd be able to handle this better." That comment hit me like a slap in the face. I was grappling with the fact that the woman I loved was not only cheating on me but was also belittling my feelings. It was in that moment that I realized something important. Emily was not the same person I had married. "I can't do this anymore," I finally said, my voice shaking with the weight of my decision. "I don't want to spend another moment in this house pretending everything is fine. This isn't love. It's a betrayal." Her eyes widened, and for a second, I saw something that looked like regret. But then, she quickly masked it with irritation. "You're being foolish. We can work through this. We've been together too long to just throw it all away." But the truth was, I didn't want to work through this. The thought of sharing a home with someone who had so easily broken my trust felt unbearable. I needed space to process everything, to figure out who I was outside of our relationship. I took a deep breath and continued, "I think we need to separate for a while. I need to clear my head and see what I truly want. This isn't just a rough patch. You crossed a line, and I can't just pretend it didn't happen." Emily stared at me, disbelief etched across her face. "You're really going to walk away from us over some stupid mistake?" "It's not a mistake, Emily. It's a choice you made," I replied, my voice firm. "I don't think I can ever look at you the same way again. I deserve better than this, and so do you. You need to think about what you really want." With that, I turned and walked out of the dining room, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow wash over me. I was terrified of what lay ahead, but I knew I had to reclaim my life. The thought of starting over felt daunting, but clinging to a love that had been tainted by betrayal seemed even worse. As I packed a few essentials, the heaviness of my decision hung in the air. I felt a bittersweet sense of freedom, but also a gut-wrenching ache. I realized that this was a turning point, not just in our relationship but in my life as a whole. I was finally taking control, ready to find out who I was outside of this heartbreak. Leaving the house was one of the hardest things I've ever done. As I drove away, I felt like I was leaving behind a piece of my heart, but I knew it was necessary. I spent the first few nights at my brother's place, surrounded by family who offered their support and comfort. They listened as I poured out my feelings, and their kindness helped me begin to process the pain. In the days that followed, I started to rediscover myself. I picked up hobbies I had neglected, like hiking and playing guitar. I even started journaling. Writing down my thoughts became a cathartic release for the confusion and heartbreak swirling inside me. With each entry, I began to heal, slowly piecing together the parts of myself that Emily's betrayal had shattered. I also took the time to reflect on our relationship and what went wrong. I realized that while I loved Emily, I had allowed my work to consume me, thinking I was providing for our future. But in doing so, I had neglected our emotional connection. It was a painful realization, but it also brought clarity. It wasn't solely her fault. It was a failure on both sides. Ultimately, I decided to file for divorce. It wasn't an easy choice, but it felt necessary for my healing. The moment I signed those papers, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I was closing a painful chapter of my life, and while it hurt, I knew I was opening the door to new beginnings. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I learned a lot about trust and communication in relationships. Betrayal can turn your world upside down, but it can also serve as a powerful catalyst for growth. I learned that it's essential to check in with your partner and make time for each other, especially when life gets busy. To anyone reading this who might find themselves in a similar situation, trust your instincts. If something feels off, don't ignore it. Communication is key, and you deserve a partner who values you and your feelings. Remember, you are worth so much more than someone's betrayal. I don't know what the future holds for me, but I'm finally excited to find out. Here's to new beginnings. After the dust settled, I had to face the reality of moving forward on my own. The divorce process wasn't as dramatic as I thought it would be. Emily seemed more indifferent than anything, like she had already mentally checked out long before we even had that final conversation. She agreed to the terms without much pushback, and we divided our assets quickly. No fights over the house or the dogs, thankfully. It all felt oddly cold, like we were business partners dissolving a company, not two people who, as strange as it sounds, I'm grateful for how it ended. There was no drawn-out legal battle, no bitter accusations thrown back and forth. It was just over. But even in that simplicity, the emotional toll was massive. I felt like a failure, like I had invested so much time, energy, and love into something that fell apart so easily. I spent the first few weeks feeling hollow, questioning my self-worth and whether I could ever trust anyone again. I'd go to work, come home, and just sit in silence, staring at the walls of my new apartment. The loneliness hit hard. Even though our relationship had been on the rocks for months before the discovery, there's something so final about being truly alone. I was grieving not just the loss of Emily, but the life I had pictured with her. But as time passed, the pain started to dull. I realized I was starting to feel more like myself again, maybe even a better version of myself. Therapy helped. Talking to someone who wasn't emotionally invested in the situation gave me perspective. My therapist helped me work through the anger, the self-blame, and most importantly, the fear of moving forward. I focused on rebuilding my confidence, stepping out of my comfort zone to try new things. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in ages, and for the first time in years, I started to enjoy life outside of the context of a relationship. It was freeing, in a way. I was learning to be enough for myself, to fill the void Emily had left without needing someone else to do it for me. Every day was a small victory. Whether it was saying no to the urge to check her social media or simply waking up feeling a little less heavy than the day before. I realized that healing isn't linear. There were days where I felt great and others where the weight of everything would come crashing back down. But with each step, I was moving towards something better, something healthier, something that felt like me. Now that I'm on the other side of this mess, I can look back with some clarity. It's strange how something as painful as betrayal can teach you so much about yourself. In the thick of it, I felt lost, like the ground had been ripped out from under me. But now, I realized that this whole experience forced me to grow in ways I never thought possible. The biggest lesson I've learned? You can't control other people's actions, but you can control how you respond to them. I used to think love meant sticking by someone no matter what, but sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away when that love is no longer being respected. Emily's infidelity was a reflection of her choices, not my worth as a partner. That's something I wish I had understood sooner. I also learned the importance of communication. In hindsight, I can see that both Emily and I stopped communicating in meaningful ways long before she cheated. I'm not excusing what she did. There's never an excuse for betrayal, but I do think we both failed each other in different ways. If we had talked about our feelings, maybe things wouldn't have escalated the way they did. Or maybe we would have realized we weren't right for each other much earlier. For anyone going through something similar, here's my advice. Don't ignore your gut. If things feel off, don't sweep it under the rug. Have the hard conversations. And if those conversations don't lead to resolution, it's okay to walk away. Your peace is more important than holding on to a relationship out of fear or obligation. Also, give yourself time to heal. Don't rush into the next thing to distract yourself from the pain. Sit with it, as uncomfortable as it may be, and work through it. I had to face my demons head-on before I could move forward, and as hard as that was, I'm better for it now. I'm not saying I have everything figured out, because I don't, but I'm proud of the person I'm becoming. I'm learning to trust again, mostly myself, and I'm slowly opening up to the idea of love again. But this time, I'm going into it with clearer boundaries and a better understanding of my own worth. So, to anyone reading this who feels like their world is falling apart, just know that it gets better. The pain won't last forever. And when the dust settles, you'll come out stronger, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. Trust me, you're going to be okay.